Welcome to Film and Page. I'm Dominic, and in this video, I'm going to be talking about and reviewing the book Dune, the David Lynch Files, Volume 2, published in 2020 by Bear Manor Media, written by Kenneth George Godwin. So this book is about Kenneth Godwin and his partner Anatol Pakanowski, who are hired to film the making of David Lynch's Dune, in what would have been an in-depth look at how David Lynch filmed Dune in 1984. But first, I want to take a closer look at the book before I get into my feelings and what I thought of the book itself. So let's have a closer look at this book. The David Lynch Files Volume 2, 6 months behind the scenes of one of the biggest science fiction movies ever made, by Kenneth George Godwin. So right off the bat, the design of the cover is not bad. It's pretty nice. I like the iconic picture it has there from the 1984 film of Muad'Dib on the sands getting ready to ride the giant worm. So we'll take a quick look at the spine. And that's the back of the book. So a nice layout, nice design for the book. Now we'll take a quick look on the inside. And there we have the table of contents. And an introduction by the author. Actually, I like this little card that was done up on set there. So the book is actually laid out fairly good, and it's filled with these black and white photographs. So it's comfortable to read. And so it's not, it's like more of a trade format instead of like a paperback format. And then throughout the book it has documents that were on set, call sheets, things like that. So that's kind of cool. And here's a look at some of the behind the scenes photographs. Now there's a lot of photographs in this book. I'm just going to show some of them. I'm not going to go through every single one, but there's a lot of photographs in this book, which is kind of nice. That really gives you a look at a lot of stuff that went on behind the scenes. So it's pretty cool. It's too bad they weren't in color though, these photographs. I don't know if they originally were in color or they were all in black and white. So that's a look at some of the photographs inside the book. So I have to say, I like the design of the book. It's got a nice layout, and it's comfortable to read. So that's a closer look at the book. Now, this was a book that I had really looked forward to reading. I saw it on Amazon, bought it right away, and it sat on my bookshelf for a little while. But when it finally came up in the queue of what I wanted to read next, I thought this was going to be a real page turner, because I've always enjoyed these types of books that go into a lot of detail behind the scenes of movies that I'm really into. And not just like the special effects and things like that, but a lot of the drama and studio politics that goes on behind the making of some of these films. It makes for like a really entertaining read. But this book didn't deliver on that, which I was really disappointed with. So my overall feeling about the book was it was kind of boring, actually. And it didn't really go into much detail about the film, even though that's what it's supposed to be about. So now, how this book is put together, as you saw earlier in the video, it's a series of diary entries that were written by Kenneth Godwin at the time while he was on this project working on this documentary. Because of that, it kind of gets repetitive really fast because a lot of the entries deal with, for example, him and his partner go down to the studio. For a lot of the first few entries, they can't really do anything because they're waiting on their equipment to get there. And when their equipment finally gets there, it'll go one of two ways. They'll either not feel like going down to the studio that day, so they'll stay in their hotel rooms, or when they get down to the studio, they have all these equipment problems and have to give up for the day and go home. So at that point, it starts to get really repetitive because a lot of that happens. Not only that, there's a lot of things in this book that aren't even related to the movie or don't deal with the movie that, in my opinion, I found really boring, and I just wanted to know about the film because that's why I bought the book. So, for example, Kenneth Godwin, at this point in his life, he was trying to become a screenwriter. So he had this screenplay that he had written, and he was trying to pitch it as a movie, him and his partner. So there's a lot of chapters that deal with him trying to pitch this other movie that's not Dune that I didn't care about. So that part made it boring. So he tries to pitch it to David Lynch and then a few other people in the book. So there's quite a chunk of the book that actually deals with that. And the other thing the book goes into a lot on is the relationship between him and his partner Anatol. It slowly but surely, you can tell their relationship degrades rapidly over their time they're working together, which is kind of interesting, but at the same time doesn't have anything to do with the making of Dune or any of the backstage stuff that was going on at the time. Not only that, the way this book is written, I really get the impression that these two guys, while they were trying to film all this behind-the-scenes stuff, they're really on the periphery of what's going on. They're really on the edge, and they're not really in there to know what's going on or get anything that's really any good. And anything that is interesting that gets mentioned in this book, the author quickly glosses over it, where I wish they would have gone into more detail. One example is the original actor that was hired to play Gurney Halleck in the '84 film. It wasn't originally Patrick Stewart. They had another actor. They brought him in, and he had a heavy drinking problem, and he wasn't in good shape. And when they seen him and how he was, they realized that this wasn't going to work, so they let him go, and they replaced him with Patrick Stewart. So it's very briefly mentioned in this book, this actor is let go. But it doesn't even mention that who he's replaced with, nothing like that, and it doesn't go into any more detail than that. So there's a story there that I'd like to know more about, what was going on there with that, but the book doesn't really get into it. So I found that part really disappointing, and there's a few other examples of that. Now, the reason why I think this book is the way it is because of what actually went on during their time on set. So they were supposed to follow David Lynch around. That was the original idea of this documentary, but it seemed like the documentary got hijacked by all these different people who, for some reason, wanted to keep these two guys away from David Lynch. One of those people being Raffaella De Laurentiis. She really hijacked the project and didn't want them going near David Lynch and was like getting them to focus on all these other various parts that was interesting but kind of boring compared to other things that were going on at the time. So, like, you know, filming people making the costumes in the wardrobe department and all that, instead of following David Lynch around and seeing how he actually goes about directing a movie. And I think maybe that's why this book turned out the way it is. Now, the other books that I've read similar to this one, I'm going to give a comparison. The two books I read, and I read these two books back in the 90s, and that was William Shatner's Star Trek Memories, and the follow-up to that one, William Shatner's Star Trek Movie Memories. The first book went into a lot of detail behind the scenes of the making of the original series, and then the second book went into a lot of detail of behind the scenes making of the movies. And those books were actually really good page turners and just really gave you a glimpse on all the backstabbing, cutthroat politics that go on behind the making of some of these series and films. It was really eye-opening. It made for a really fantastic read. And I was expecting something similar in this book, but it didn't deliver on that. Like I said before, I found it really boring, and I found it hard to get through. It took me a long time to read it because it was hard for me to keep my attention into it. I just wanted to get through it and get it done. I wasn't enjoying the reading of this book at all, to be honest. And now the one good thing about the books has a lot of photographs in it, which is kind of nice. A lot of behind the scenes photographs, which you saw earlier. The one highlight though of the book that is, I don't know if this is even worth buying the book for this or not, but it is a highlight of the book. And actually, in my opinion, there's the seed to a much better book buried in the end of this book. That if the author wanted to write a book about this person, I think it would actually be a really interesting book. So at the back of the book, you have interviews with some of the actors. And some of the people that are interviewed at the back of the book, and these make for actually pretty interesting interviews, is David Lynch, Jack Nance, who played Nefud, Jürgen Prochnow, Patrick Stewart, Sting, and Sean Young, Aldo Puccini, construction manager of the sets, Bob Billmere, Apogee Inc. supervisor, and John Dykstra, special effects director, Apogee Inc. So those are the interviews that are at the back of the book, and those interviews are actually pretty good. But the one thing about the book, though, that is interesting, and these are actually the best parts of the book. These don't really have anything to do with Dune, but they are the best parts of the book. And this author didn't seem like he spent a lot of time with any of the actors, except for one, and that's Jack Nance. He spends a lot of time with him in the book. And there's actually, at the end, after all the interviews, there's a closing appendix about his time spent with Jack Nance. From reading that, I get the impression that Jack Nance has a very interesting life story that's just hinted at in the back of this book. And I think if the author would write a book about Jack Nance and what he knows of Jack Nance and his time spent with Jack Nance in a lot of detail and written it, not in the form of like diary entries, but interviewed people that knew Jack Nance, went into this guy's life, because this guy has got an interesting life, and he kind of had, it's not that he didn't have, but he did have a tragic end, unfortunately. So there's something there that's really interesting about this actor, and reading the end of this made me want to learn more about Jack Nance and his life. So that's the one highlight of the book. But now, if you're looking for something that goes into a lot of detail about the behind the scenes of the making of Dune and all the stuff that goes on, politics and stuff, this is not it. This doesn't go into a lot of detail. It's like I said before, you always feel like you're kind of on the outskirts of the action and you're not really getting the full picture. So that makes it kind of a frustrating read. And on top of that, as I said, it goes and deals with a lot of things that has nothing to do with the making of Dune, like the writer's screenplay and his feud with his partner that he's trying to make this documentary with. So if you're expecting something like William Shatner's movie memories or anything like that, this is not it, unfortunately. One thing I have to say in closing before I wrap this video up, it's to touch on the footage they filmed while they were behind the scenes of this movie. And apparently, from what I got from this book, they filmed hours and hours of behind-the-scenes footage of David Lynch's 1984 Dune. And part of their contract was that Universal got all the rights to that footage. So they shot all that footage, but they didn't get to keep any of it. All the author had was some audio interviews that is actually in the book that I talked about earlier. That's what he had left, but all that footage that they filmed is gone. And so he even tried contacting Universal, and apparently all that footage has been destroyed, which is a real shame for a lot of reasons that Universal would destroy that footage. Hours of it. Like, not just a little bit of it, but hours and hours of it behind the scenes of that film. Why they did it, I don't know. But as far as anyone knows right now, all that footage is gone. And that is a real crime and a real shame, because that is something that would have been really awesome to release right now. Imagine if they had all that footage in a vault somewhere put away. They pulled it all out, cleaned it all up, put it together into a never-before-seen behind-the-scenes documentary, distilled it down to a really good 2 hours or 2.5 hours, or even 3 hours. That would have been really something cool to see. But unfortunately, that didn't happen, and that's a real shame. So that's everything I got to say in this video. Let me know what you think in the comments section, and I will see you at the next one. I'd like to say thank you to all of my subscribers. I appreciate you all in helping this channel grow. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also, don't forget to hit the bell icon so you'll be notified when new videos are uploaded.